welcome to America House. My name is Tanya Strelchenko. I'm America House Kyiv director. Tonight we have a very special program. We have the presentation of the book Snapshots Sent Home by Blatty, Jan Blatty, our friend. Jan is Fulbright alumna. She is the US veteran. She's also a big friend of America House. Jan, welcome. So great to have you tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And also with us tonight online is another friend of America House, Director of Fulbright Ukraine, Jessica Zaykovich. Jessica, hello, good evening.
Hello, great to see you and wonderful to collaborate with America House once again. Thank you for having us.
We are so pleased to collaborate with Fulbright. Thank you. We will have a conversation, and it's, as you can see, will be in a hybrid format. So we have audience here at America House Kyiv here with us tonight, but also a lot of our colleagues and friends and people who are interested in this topic will join us online. So friends who are here in Kyiv, we have my colleagues who will help you with the microphone in case you have questions. So you will see Christina, here she is. She will help you. She will help you with the microphone. Friends who joined us online, you also have an opportunity to ask your questions. Just please type them in the chat box and we will read them out. My colleague Mariana will read them out. So everyone can ask questions to Jan. And I will start, I'll be the first one. I prepared a few questions from myself. I just finished reading the book. It's an amazing book. It's very powerful. It's not an easy book to read, to be honest. It's not the one you read and feel like uplifted and in a great mood. It's a complicated book about our complicated reality. However, I feel like every Ukrainian should read it. It doesn't matter if you're a war veteran or a civilian person. It will probably, you will recognize yourself in this book. Jen, how was it to write it? And how do you feel about finishing the book and seeing it published?
I feel like it's never finished, to be honest with you. But if I didn't put it out now, then I would wait another 10 years. So it was very complicated to write because, as we all know, that full-scale invasion happened in February, which definitely kind of changed what I thought I was going to be writing about. But yeah, complicated.
How long did it take you to write it?
I actually started writing this book on the roots of it on journal pages in Iraq and Afghanistan over 20 years ago.
So it started.
Yeah, but I didn't really know what my book was about until I came to Ukraine.
So your experience in Ukraine kind of helped you to frame it in the way it is today.
Yeah.
Jessica is, I think, an expert in many things, and she's also, I think, a brilliant reader. So Jessica, I know you read this book as well. Can you tell us what are your impressions about the book?
Well, I've had the privilege of knowing Jen while she was writing this book. And that was really special because I got to see her and interact with her and some of the people in the book. And what makes this book interesting is that it is not only a text, it's part of a larger project that includes photographs, recordings of sounds, voices, which we'll get to in a little bit, and also an exhibit, a photography exhibit, which we will talk about as well. So I'm no expert by any means, but I really, really have enjoyed reading the book. And I hope today that maybe the author will also read an excerpt for us in her own voice.
Absolutely. This is something that we planned. We will hear Jan reading one of the abstracts from the book. My personal goal for tonight is to convince you guys in the audience and those who watch us online to read the book when it's available. We also hope it will be available in Ukrainian. Is it true?
I sure hope so. That's the goal.
That's the goal. So once it is, we will let you know. For now, it is available in English.
In English only, right now, unfortunately.
It's called Snapshots Sent Home. And when I read it, it was almost like snapshots put into verbal form, you know? Like instead of photographs, you described moments as if you observed the photograph, but it's like made of words. Is it on purpose or is just my perception of the book?
I don't think I was thinking about writing it that way, but so much of what I write about, if I've forgotten an experience, I remember through photographs.
And that's why the book is so visual. Even like you just read it, you can visualize, like it's very imagery. And also, I will tell our audience, the beauty of it is that it's not necessarily like chronologically, like direct. Some things are reverse. You travel together with Jan in her memories from 2001 to Afghanistan to her experience in Iraq, and then all of a sudden you are back to Ukraine 2018, and then it's Ukraine 2022. And somehow it first feels, again, I'm just a reader here, right? It's my perception of the book. It feels like as if you are like seeing the tapestry of different fragments of different events, but they all make sense. When you wrote this book, like how was it? Can you guide us through this writing process, if I may ask you?
It was a labor of love, because for those 20 plus years, I had a really hard time trying to create what they call a narrative arc in writing. And that is why for so long I never finished a book, because for me, I write like my writing is much like my photography in snapshots. It's what I see in a moment. I take that photograph. And the way I write is the same way. I write as in I'm feeling a moment. So those moments don't always glue together. Like I don't intentionally try to, but I don't know. We somehow found a way, and even I still don't know if it does make sense. I hope it does.
Oh, it does.
Okay.
It does. I also have a question. Like, there is so much, history in the book itself, because you were you participated in so many historic events. And there is this interesting, very powerful, abstract in the book. It's a quote. I will read it out loud. "No one can be the same person they were years ago. Not when we've been molded by space and time and the experience of life." My question is, Jan in 2001, Jan in 2018, Jan in 2022, who are all these three people? Are they similar? Are they different?
They're absolutely different, but they are the same. Just that's a hard question. I don't know. I think I'm just a little bit more grown up, and I've been able to see war from a more removed perspective instead of being right in it. And that is the difference too. And now that I've also met so many veterans from other wars and not only my own.
And I chose those years because they are connected to some milestones that you mentioned in the book. In 2001, you were in Afghanistan, right?
Right after September 11th, 2001, I had just started my service in the Army. I thought I was going to go on peacekeeping missions. I didn't join the military thinking I was going to war, because we were at peace at that time. And a year after I graduated West Point, 9/11 happened. And all of a sudden our unit was on lockdown. And yeah, we started, the first of our battalion went in November of 2001, and my company moved in the first week of January to Kandahar. So yeah.
And maybe if I may also ask this kind of personal question, how did you even join at the West Point Academy? Like, what is the story
I was
about?
a really good tennis player. That's about what it is. They recruited me to play tennis at the United States Military Academy. I didn't even know that it existed until that day. And to be honest with you, I wanted to go to art school, and my mom said, hell no. So at West Point, it's nobody's paying for that except yourself and your service. So.
And it's probably the one at least of the most prestigious military academies.
That's what people say, but I mean, I graduated, so.
Oh, come on.
But they do say that, yeah.
And then I also mentioned 2018, and this is the year when you came to Ukraine.
Right, that was when I first came, yeah.
In the book, when you describe your first encounter with Ukraine, with Kyiv, if I understood it correctly, I remember you mentioned wild energy you felt in Maidan.
Yeah.
What was it? And do you still feel it? And maybe you can explain it now, thinking about it retrospectively.
When I first came, or before I first came, I had done a significant amount of research about the war in Eastern Ukraine and how it started. And of course, it took me back to the Maidan Revolution. And I even watched some films about it. And I was just absolutely like blown away, captivated by just the spirit of Ukrainians fighting for their civil rights and then self-deploying to war from after the revolution. Whereas my wars, we fight what somebody else tells us to do, and often you don't really know why you're there, except to take care of your
comrades and your soldiers to get back home. So yeah, when I went that first time, and I remember just landing in Kyiv, and they took me to the Maidan. And yeah, I felt like I could feel it. It's just like this power of like independence and fighting for change. Yeah.
You know, when I read it, I was also like, is this like this wild energy that you described? Is this a premonition that you felt that even bigger war is going to happen?
I did not. No, I was in a place where once I started visiting the front line, I was photographing these portraits of these volunteers because I wanted to bring light to the war, and I wanted it to end, because they had fought for so much in 2014 and 15, and it just kept dragging on and on and on and on, and didn't seem like the world's politicians were doing much to end it. Yeah.
Were there any stereotypes about Ukraine you had before coming and seeing it?
No. I mean, all I knew about Ukraine was sitting across a mess table in Iraq, in Kuwait briefly, and there were 2 Ukrainian soldiers across from me who didn't speak any English, and they looked very angry. And I mean, it was like so foreign to me. I didn't even know where Ukraine was on a map at that time. That was in 2003. That's it.
Who knew, right?
Yeah, so no, I had no imaginings of what it would be like, except I knew that there was a war. So I think I definitely had some anticipation. When you've never been somewhere, your mind can create anything it wants to. So in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to Ukraine, and like there's a war there. That must mean the whole country's war, war. It's like your head can go crazy. And then I landed, and I was like, this city is beautiful. I'm like, this is like a functioning, beautiful, modern city, and there is a war, but it's on a different side. So,
which is a very interesting point in your book as well. And I really appreciated this part. I think every Ukrainian now can relate to it. So again, I might just quote in not in a direct way, but how I remember it, it was that you felt, even the day you arrived to Ukraine, you felt like there were two parallel realities, right?
Right. Well, I felt that just like, okay, there is a war in Ukraine. I felt that there must be a shared struggle across Ukraine about the war, that everybody would be affected by it. So what I slowly started to understand was that there definitely was an absolute separation between those who had experienced the war and those who had not. Like, I was thinking at first, okay, I'm American, we go to Afghanistan or Iraq, and then we're just pulled out and we're thrown back on our land, like thousands of miles away across the ocean. But I imagine that in Ukraine, if you're on the same land, that everybody would be really affected by it. But there was an absolute divide between the civilian world and the soldier community. And a lot of soldiers were having a very hard time transitioning, even escaping, trying to move on from the war, because they felt so out of place unless they were with their community.
Do you feel it's still the same way?
I think that February 24th, 2022 changed a lot of things, and it brought everyone together. I feel the entire of Ukraine that was here, and at least those who experienced what was happening, together. And no, I think that it might be changing again, because it can start, like, divides can reemerge. But no, I like, at least in those months and that year, I feel like there's such more of a strong understanding between the soldier community and civilian community now. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it is there.
There is much more connection, right?
Yeah.
I think it's also that, maybe again, this is my observation, my personal experience, these parallel realities, they kind of collided. I mean, even if you take Kyiv, we are civilians here, right? One day you have totally, like you mentioned, peace life, right?
Yeah.
You have peace life, and the next moment there is an attack, and it's not a peace life anymore. You are in a war zone immediately. Doesn't matter where you are. Like, you're not safe in your own house. So maybe this is also part of it, why this reality is kind of...
Yes, and I mean, not to say that people who have always lived like in eastern Ukraine and have been subject to shelling, it's like before the full-scale invasion. I mean, it's not just about soldiers and not soldier, but more about people who experience war, like firsthand, or are within the vicinity of it, and then those who are absolutely removed. But yeah, after the attacks, it like everybody came together in a way I almost feel like was September 11th for our country. Like it didn't matter if you were a soldier or a civilian. Everyone felt it, and a lot of people have quickly forgotten it.
Exactly. There is another very interesting moment in the book that I was struck by. You call Afghanistan the War Museum in the book. Can you explain this concept? And my second question is, do you think Ukraine is threatened to become the War Museum too?
Well, I called Afghanistan the War Museum when I was woke up, because it was the only way that I could describe what it felt like to wake up in this place I knew nothing about, except it felt as if it were 100 wars, like in the ghosts, all in this one location. That it was just this like connection point between previous wars and current wars. Everywhere you went, like there were relics from, war trophies. For example, understanding that the Soviets were there before us. They were selling Soviet bayonets from the 80s, from this war. And it actually wasn't until I came to Ukraine that I started realizing just how connected everything was. And it's like, back in my mind back then, Soviet meant Russian, like for so many of us. And when I came here and I interviewed the first of, 20 years later, one of the volunteer soldiers that I was interviewing, he was a former Soviet soldier. It just like, it made it click. It's like I knew it, but it clicked. I was like, okay, the Ukrainians were there too, like where I just came, like in another land, maybe sent for a reason that wasn't their own at that time. And about what I think if it's going to be Ukraine, that's a really loaded question. I really hope not.
Hopefully not.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do everything to make sure it's not going to happen. But I kind of, felt that way because, like you mentioned, some of the artifacts of the war, you can also see them here. They're almost like part of our everyday life. We don't even notice anymore. And I was like, will this be our future, And what to do to prevent it? Like, do you have any ideas?
I have better leaders in the world. Get rid of every single politician.
Okay, let me jump in with another question.
Jessica has some ideas. Please do. Please jump in.
I wanted to mention the very powerful and prominent moment of 9/11 that shadows this book, and your experience, JT, of that moment in propelling you to join the war out of patriotism, out of what you and I have talked about before, a feeling of being attacked on one's own soil in America, which was a new feeling for a lot of Americans and has completely changed our generation. And you mentioned this is also something Ukraine knows very well and feels on a daily basis. And I'm just wondering if you could speak some more about that for Ukrainians, about what 9/11 meant to you,
right.
generation.
Yeah. So I think that, I don't know what happened before 9/11 to different generations, but at least for my generation, for so many Americans, 9/11 was probably the only time that we've ever felt what Ukrainians do feel quite often, being attacked on our own border. And the fear surrounding that time, like it was shared across the entire country. It was kind of this probably what many civilians in Ukraine felt when Russia started the full invasion and airstrikes. Like it was just this impossible became possible. And for us, there was just this fear of what is coming next. We didn't really understand, a lot of us. It felt like it was World War III, the beginning of World War III. And we didn't know if that was going to be one attack or if more were coming in the next weeks and months. So I, as a soldier then, felt absolute pride when they said we were going to Afghanistan, but that was in the beginning. And I think that just came from just this feeling of needing to make up for a wrong of being attacked. Yeah. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Jessica, what was the most memorable moment in the book for you personally?
I know the character Valkyrie, and she is featured throughout this book from 2018 all the way until the present moment. And her character is very profound because she is, a defender of Ukraine who left Russia and changed her citizenship to Ukrainian citizenship. And also throughout the book, she has, these deep conflicted moments of being torn between her life and responsibilities as a mother to a young child and her feelings to defend and fight the country and trying to reconcile how to navigate that. So those were, I think, the most moving for me in the book, because I know this person, I met her, and I think it's also just a very honest and direct portrait maybe of what it's like for a lot of defenders and veterans who are women, who have children, and who are balancing all of these different types of responsibilities that they feel.
Thank you. I enjoyed reading about her too. She has fans now, thanks to you. Would you like to read maybe out loud an abstract from your book so that the audience maybe get a little bit more understanding of it?
Would you like me to?
I would love to.
Okay.
Please do.
Because you need to change the question. Which one would you like me to read?
Maybe the voices you wanted?
Voices? Okay. All right. March 2023, Kyiv, Ukraine. I'm a photographer, but really, I'm just a human drawn toward the truth, in snapshots of truth. Sometimes through sight, sometimes through writing, sometimes through capturing ambient sound, and sometimes through recording voices. Voices that speak the truth of a life lived, that can remove differences and borders and racial divides rather than created them. Voices that need to be preserved as a truth of history for years to come. Voices that can tell us the stories we regret we never asked. Voices that make you feel as if you're still standing with a person long after they are gone. Before we left for Afghanistan, I bought a small voice recorder and packed it in my footlocker, along with packages of ramen, cartons of cigarettes, disposable cameras, and extra rolls of 35mm film. It was the kind you could buy from a small electronics section of a Walgreens or a CVS, an old school portable Sony with microcassette tapes and sound quality that later proved horrible for anything past a voice note. I can't remember why I felt a need to bring one with me, outside of having this perpetual drive to preserve and document everything in my life. And sound was a sense I always felt most connected to. It offered a different dimension of memory and nostalgia that looking at a photograph did not. I didn't use it often when I was there, but when I did, I recorded the ambient sounds surrounding us, the gunfire and explosions, the leadership briefings, the smack talk and banter between my comrades, or even between myself and my soldiers. And sometimes when alone in the tent, I recorded my own voice, quietly talking to someone on the other side, in the other world, a written letter in voice without rehearsal, a letter that I never sent home. I imagine I was trying to preserve my own voice as a memory for them, just in case I didn't make it home. I never met him, but for some reason felt as if I did, in some way. It's hard to explain. The volunteer transcriber of Bijan's recording wrote to me. Beguiled by his voice and story, she followed him on Facebook over the years and must have noticed the months on end of silence, the primary posts on his account coming from his mother during her search for his whereabouts. Her comment reminded me of the earliest years of my project, when strangers from the Ukrainian community around the world volunteered to transcribe and translate the hours on end of audio recordings. I imagine the voices of the volunteers became sealed in their memories, just as they had in my own, intensified by the process of replaying the clips again and again to annotate every single word. The devotion of time required for transcription is often miscalculated by a newcomer. The exhibit in Kyiv was to be the first time we'd play the voices of the volunteers to the public. But now, instead of listening to them in a museum or an institute while looking at their portraits, I'm sending them to family members and comrades of those who have passed on. even the in-between moments, the photograph snapshots in audio form. Bijan and Babai and even Valkyrie playing guitar and singing, the celebration and banter between all of us together, the subtle nuances and details of a voice that makes each human unique. The purpose they are serving was unintended and, to be brutally honest, beyond painful at times, because never did I imagine a day when I'd stand in a Kyiv cemetery and watch the procession line at Bijan's funeral, throwing handfuls of dirt in a grave beneath the portrait I made of him cradling his guitar. But it's the kind of purpose my work can serve in the moment without misinterpretation. And it's quite possibly much larger than I ever imagined, in the way I might have imagined the purpose of recording my voice in Afghanistan, played in the times when we are overtaken in fear, that we've forgotten the sound of a loved one's voice. But even before the invasion abandoned the opening, it had already become clear that the message I wanted to share might never break through the sound barrier in a country where the war was such a life force. It's irrelevant, at least now, because the one purpose I thought it might serve is no longer relevant. The divide between the front line and the peace life has been compressed through a struggle of war that's now been experienced by Ukrainians across the boundaries of what was once considered the peaceful life. And the divide between this veteran and soldier community, they were once again brought together by their shared fight, even though it might fall apart in time. Once the moment of coming together runs further and further from our memories, once the war smooths out and it converges into not a full-scale invasion, but into the same never-ending war that began almost 10 years ago, tangled in politics and bureaucracy, only now with a twisted and elevated sense of what's normal or should be expected in a 21st century war. Regardless of the exhibit or publication opportunities, I'm content in realizing my work, my contributions don't really have a finish line. It's not something for the immediate moment, but something that becomes appreciated by the smallest few in different moments, like those snapshots and handwritten letters in Ziploc bags. And maybe it will be appreciated by the larger few years and years later, a testament of truth in war that connects all those who experience war.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's a hard one to read. I did really good by not crying, Al.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah, it's very heartfelt. Thank you. I just also want to make sure the audience has a chance to ask questions if you already have some of those. So please raise your hand and our colleague will approach you with a microphone. Charlie has a question. Also, you can ask it in Ukrainian and I will translate if you're more comfortable. Not you, Charlie.
Jen, thank you so much. We're all really grateful that you're here. I'm actually curious about your service in the military, and I'm curious about what are some of the challenges that women in the military face that the public might not know about or might not expect?
I didn't have any problems as a woman.
Cool. Thank you very much.
I'm not really.
Obviously, I think you were under fire, under shelling, sometimes in dangerous situation on the war. It took its place when the danger was very close to you on the war. Maybe tell us about some maybe situation when your life was in danger on the war.
A situation when my life was in danger in which war? This one? Afghanistan, Iraq?
Ukraine.
Maybe here? Ukraine?
Yeah.
I mean, every time you're in Ukraine, first of all, you are in danger. But Bakhmut, I mean, what? Do I have to like give stories?
No, I meant maybe some explosion was nearby you.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
catastrophic situation.
I described it.
People, dead people around you.
Yes. Can I defer this question? Yeah.
So it happened, yeah.
Thank you.
This actually leads me to if I may, one more question. In the book, you describe a very interesting concept, like you contemplate on the nature of heroism, but not even heroism itself, because it's a beautiful thing, right, to be heroic. More about how very often people are labeled heroes to to be manipulated with, or not necessarily. This could be almost a destructive tool, you know, to use them. Can you tell a little bit more about it if you want?
That was a hard theme to continually write about, because I feel like I might get a lot of backlash for it. But yes, there is a common theme within the soldier community that, like the chapter, it's one more than one. The nature of heroism. It's oftentimes it's used as I don't even know how to explain this, except you have to read the book to understand it better. But that, yes, there are heroic actions, but I feel like our government and the civil sector has used it as such a tool to not just to highlight or commemorate people, but almost romanticize war in a way at times. And often it is falsely used to maybe cover up something or to appease the families of the dead, when like coming up with these big romantic stories about something, when the truth is the people that are standing there with those people don't know, or are the ones that know the truth, and they know who their heroes are. And it can create divides between them, or make some feel that they are in the shadows. It can create this huge burden of having to carry a lie for years, like a responsibility that you have to perpetuate some of those romanticized stories. And oftentimes it's misgiven to people in just very political. And then soldiers start comparing each other. I mean, I could go on and on anyways, but it can be a beautiful thing, but it is, I feel that heroes should be defined by the heroes, like by the soldiers there. They know who the real heroes are and who was with them. It's not something like for medals and pins and like, wait till the war is over if you want for that kind of stuff. You
Almost
know,
as a
like
destructive
everyone
tool.
is like, for fighting, you're a hero. You don't need these like crazy, yes, it's distractive.
Yeah, my understanding, and thank you for sharing it. My understanding was also, you know, it's dehumanizing people. Like you
Yes.
label them with hero, but what is the real story behind these persons, and were they made to be hero? Was it even, you know, what was the situation that made them to be hero?
Right.
I feel, you know, maybe it's a bit irrelevant, but I feel sometimes even for civilians in Ukraine, oh, you're so heroic, you're resilient, you can do it. It is, to be honest, could be like a very it's a lot of pressure on people who are being called like this first. It's also it also a little bit of a dehumanizing experience, you know, because what is the real story? And as I understand, the whole project that you created, and please correct me if I'm wrong, was to convey the real human stories of soldiers, unintentional, like you're saying, the photographs that were unintentional was like they maybe you can tell more about it.
So the point of it, like I was actually very specific when I started the photographic project, by the way, which is what this is, the story within the book is this journey of making these portraits and audio stories of the volunteer soldiers from 2014. And one of the criteria for many, like I would always tell everyone, stop bringing me heroes, like, because they're very famous people that were already highly publicized, received all kinds of awards. I said, that's not the person I want. I want, not because I don't think they have a story to tell, but because it's like too intentional. Like they will say the story that they want to be known, instead of just being trusting and confident and telling me a story that's more of humanity and real, like the real soldier story, not the romantic heroic version.
Thank you.
Not how you want the world to perceive you, but who you really are. Yeah, because if people understood who these soldiers were and who was fighting the human side, then maybe the world would support Ukrainians more.
I agree.
I have a question.
Yes, please do, Jessica.
JT, I know that you have read Zinky Boys by Svetlana Alexievich, and in her work, she also really has a lot of dialogue with the people she's writing about, and over many years. In addition to Svetlana Alexievich, are there also others that you've read that you admire? What are your influences?
For like first-person testimony?
Yeah, for your writing, for your method, for your conversations that you're having. Like, what were you reading while you were writing this book?
Like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't like I didn't have an outline of how to put this together. It was like doing it on the fly and just trying pieces of order together. But I mean, I could tell you books that have been really inspirational to me, and one of them is Tribe by Sebastian Junger, who speaks a lot of the community of those who have experienced struggle. And I think that it is available in Ukraine as well, in Ukrainian. And also Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carry. I feel like the way his book is very time jumping as well. And his story is a Vietnam experience.
Thank you. Yes, we have more questions from the audience.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hey.
my name is Alexander. I'm a head of veteran NGO Green Stripe. And first of all, I would like to thank you, GT, what you stand with Ukraine for now. It's very important for us. And my question will be, how do you think, I also saw many Russian crimes, and I would like to ask you, can we use this book like proof Russian crimes in future?
I don't think that's what it is. I mean, I don't know, maybe. That's a good question. But I mean, I think we've had so much proof already and no one's doing anything.
Yes, but not all country, Russian propaganda worked not bad. Yes.
I mean, it's evidence of this invasion absolutely
Yeah,
happening for the
and
world
it's
that
very-
thinks that it wasn't happening. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very important for proof something.
Yeah.
Because you can tell about your story for world.
It's
Yes.
in there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So cool. I didn't think of that.
Thank you, Alexander. Any questions maybe online? Nothing? Yes, please, from the audience.
First of all, I would like to thank you also for your courage and for your great work. It's really very important for us. And my question, where we can read this book?
Where can you read it?
Yeah.
It is, I think that Amazon is who ships right now to Ukraine, Amazon Ukraine. And there's a Kindle version on Amazon too. If you do electronic Kindle or e-publication, you can do it that way. I hope to find a way to bring it to Ukraine soon, though, in Ukrainian as well.
We'll have one at America House Library now, right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
well, one present from Jen,
Yeah, there's
the hard
you'll
copy.
see
So,
there's maybe 5 floating around Ukraine right now. You probably see them. They're in this room.
so if you want, we may, but of course, if you return it back, because there'll be more people who would want to read it. But yes, one book will be totally available at America House to read it. And thank you. And we are so much looking forward for the Ukrainian translation as well, as we already mentioned. I think it's important for veterans and their families, but also for all Ukrainians to read it. It's so powerful.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure other questions from the audience, because I have so many myself. But okay, then the question from me. Another interesting abstract episode was not an episode, mostly like a philosophical thought from yours was that all wars are connected.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that way right now as well? And in
Yes.
what way are they connected?
That's a loaded question. I mean, there's like the cycle of the world. One influences the other. I mean, let's go to Soviets in Afghanistan, and then we're back in Afghanistan, and then now we're helping Ukraine fight Russia in Ukraine. I mean, honestly, I sometimes feel that America and I wish this wasn't the case, and Russia, like, just usually love to fight against each other, but on other people's land. Syria, wherever it might be, except this time this is on Ukrainian land here at their border. So, but yeah, I don't know how to really explain that, except that, yeah, they're all connected. I'm sure a historic researcher could write a book
Could
about
give
that.
it, yeah. But I mean, it's an important experience of yours, because you did have experience in different parts of the world, and you can see this connection. I mean, we can also think
Right.
about.
Yeah. I mean, you can even think about Iraq and when we changed some of the tactics that we were using over there and starting drone strikes on terrorist cells. and killing unmanned aircrafts, killing many civilians. And you kill a couple of civilians and 500 more of the bad guys stand up and become, because they're so angry of losing their lost loved ones. And some of those, for all you know, some of those people can be mercenaries that were helping Russia from the north into Kyiv in the beginning of the invasion. I mean, everything is connected. Everybody decides to side with a lesser evil at a different time. You know, whatever
Lesser
works for their
evil.
politics and I wish it was about like it being about doing good in the world and not just about what's best for like the finances of our country and how much power I can have, which is I feel is what we've reverted to. And that's why I said every single politician should be, well, bye-bye.
JT,
All of you can be presidents, okay?
in the book, you talk about America's wars, thinking back through history, and you mention World War II. And in your section on that, you kind of attribute to World War II a moral weight that is absent from Iraq and from Afghanistan, and certainly in the US.
I forgot about that part. Yes. So
Mhm.
going back to that same question, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's really a war.
I get very upset that, for example, in the United States, I talk about this somewhere in the book, but we don't have like a Holodomor museum. And I was shocked actually when I came to Ukraine and learning about the Holodomor. Like I couldn't believe I knew nothing about it. And I started reading more books about it and understanding that, I mean, I'm quite sure it killed more people than the Holocaust, but we have not memorialized it away in America. And then further understanding it, just that our government actually knew about it. There's some evidence of this, but we let it pass because we needed to ally with Stalin. So we supported him so we could beat the Nazis. And I guess that's the point right there. So siding with the lesser evil. Yeah, so I find that very bad. And then as well as we used to support or were working with the former warlord of Kandahar, who was to fight the Soviets to leave Afghanistan. And he is associated with Osama bin Laden, who was the schemer behind the 9/11 attacks later. So you see how they just go back and forth, lesser evil. They're all connected. Yeah.
There is a question, I think, from online audience. So Mariana, could you please read it out loud?
Yeah. So, Jen, what was your thoughts on the 24th of February, and what did you feel back then?
24th of February, I kind of felt a little bit like 9/11 again, like the unimaginable happening again. Because even though we all saw what was happening around us, it was when you're in Ukraine, you're like, nah, you know. I guess Zelensky wasn't helping with "Don't Panic," but I was shocked. Yeah, but in a sense, it was also very bizarre because I wasn't in Kyiv on the first morning of the attacks. I actually left the night before. I was somewhere in Western Ukraine. And it was so strange to me that all these like bombs and attacks were falling and I couldn't hear a thing. And that was so strange to me, is that everything that was happening was more through like talking to people on the phone, listening to things, like listening to what was happening and seeing it and losing friends. Like in that first people in my project, day 2, I think, or 3, Arena, Sfia, in Kyiv, yeah. So that's a big question too. This is why I write, because I'm really bad at answering questions.
You're great. Also, my personal story, Jen was one of those people who texted me immediately, Tanya, get out of Kyiv, which I didn't do. But I'm still thankful, you know, sometimes you just need those people who care about you. And it was like, I'm very like thankful for you thinking about me at that moment, like texting
And I only did it when I knew, for sure,
it was
here.
inevitable, right? So we are lucky and we are so grateful for the Ukrainian army. We are still here and thank God.
Thank you.
And I know that you volunteered a lot and supported Ukrainian
Yeah.
army, even from Poland, right? This is in the book.
Yeah,
and on
yeah.
the border.
Yeah.
Maybe just if you want to
put
share a
down
little bit
yeah,
about it.
I think for me, I decided that I was so angry that as a journalist, I couldn't convey the message of the threat of something like this happening through my work before the invasion, to bring awareness to it. And then all the journalists from every like corner under the refrigerator of the world was in Ukraine. And I just was like, just leave it to them. Let me do something that's more impactful. So yeah, started. So many good people just sent us money. People were flying supplies and hand luggage, delivering them personally for us to drive in and get it to everyone, because in those first months, nothing was getting to them fast enough. So we were small, but we still managed to get a lot of amazing things into the hands of the right people and very quickly. So, yeah.
And it was also in the book. I don't want to spoil all of it. Of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. Leave it for the book.
I think that's what I'm doing right now. But still, my purpose is to make sure you guys read it after, like whenever it's available. But there was this interesting moment that, as you described, being like a veteran yourself, right? Serving in so many places before coming to Ukraine. It was your duty. It was also like a job, right? Like your service. Right. But being here in Ukraine was your choice. So it's like your tribe. Do you still feel that way? Maybe if you want to share with us, because it's so important to hear.
You have to read the book, but like, how about once realizing that I didn't really fulfill my purpose in my wars because I didn't know what my purpose was besides what they told me, that I found my own purpose in Ukraine's war. So I'll just leave it there with a camera and a computer and a journal.
And if I may, another question is about photography. When I read it, it was almost like a magical tool you use sometimes. I mean, like metaphorically saying, right? To bring you like photographs that you have from your service in Afghanistan or in Iraq. Sometimes looking back, you would see things you wouldn't notice in the moment.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the same happened here in Ukraine. Probably there were photos that you would explain things to you more. But at the same time, you mentioned that even those unintentional photos can be used against people, like, and that's why you need words. Like, maybe again, if you could explain this a little bit more.
Yeah, my photographs taken way back, those were disposable cameras, and years later I was able to reflect and see some things, and they actually just served more to awaken memories more than anything. And by describing a photograph, I could really remember a situation. But in Ukraine, I feel something different. Photographing is that just there is absolutely no way to measure the devastation and the feeling of everything that is happening here, and how personal it is to so many people, and is you can't do that with a stupid picture. I'm sorry, like not even a photo essay. You can do that if you can't convey the experience of a shell landing close to you through a picture of some fire, or of what happened after, what it looks like, or even a dead body. You have to be able to reveal that feeling of standing there. Like how Bijan tells me in the book, one of his audio quotes is, it's like the thing that cannot be translated. You cannot translate the feeling of being in a place at the moment of impact and in the situation. So in a photograph, you can take it, but often too much of these repeated photographs that everybody has been seeing, it creates what people call Ukraine exhaust. It's like people are becoming so normalized and desensitized to these situations, and then at the same time, they can also be totally manipulated and used by different people. The meaning of a photograph, what it might be. But I do think that the only way to really convey something that is happening is first-person testimony from the people who are experiencing it, and that's what the point is of this book. Is that maybe through writing, not just a photograph, and explaining who these people are, it will make people really feel and understand something. No.
I have a question.
Please do.
Building on what you just said, JT, about helping people to feel and understand something, I'm wondering about the disconnected. In your book, you write about the world of the disconnected. And on one level, it's a media world, it's a spectacle of the wars that you're experiencing, that you're putting your life on the line to save your fellow soldiers in. And on the other level, sometimes the disconnected become your own family who can't understand you and what you're going through. And I think now in this particular moment in America, there are so many who are turning a blind eye to Ukraine and who are forgetting or who are deliberately, willfully looking the other way. What is the reception of your book so far? If you've had any engagement with American audiences,
Yeah.
have you seen a reception, openness, or some change?
Oh yeah. So far, the few people that I've been able to, even like Veterans Radio, I had an interview with them, and even with NPR, and everyone that has read the book so far. I mean, I can't say everyone because I don't know how many people have my book, but I have received a lot of really amazing comments from people that they feel like they understand so much more now about Ukraine. Yeah, and about the people. And because people actually are really tired as well of mainstream media in America. I mean, it just dominates. It's like, it's totally obnoxious. It's all politically motivated. It's why I kind of had to hurry and let this book go into the world last month or in February, because they could like teach about Ukraine now. This is the time, 2 years after the invasion is the time to do it. So I'll continue to keep promoting this when I get home, because yes, I do think that this will help. I know I'm just one person, but it helps.
I would also add that even Ukrainians can learn so much about ourselves, but also about bigger, like perception of what it is for any veteran to be in the war. I mean, again, it's just my observation. And of course, maybe it's just how I projected myself through this book. But the war itself seems to be just this type of eraser of purposes and senses. And like, even for military people, maybe it gives some sense at the beginning, but then when they return to the peace life, right, the senses are erased. For civilian, the same, right here. Like, it's hard to build your life, it's hard to make sense of it at all. Like, you cannot even cling to anything. Would you agree with that? Like, or do you see any sense in the war as a concept at all?
I don't know if I understand. Like, is there a sense in the war continuing?
Yes.
I mean, what else are they supposed to do? Just let Putin barrel all over Ukraine?
No, I mean,
again?
not in Ukraine. I mean, in general, war as a concept. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really big question. A long time ago, I would have said that there could be an Earth or a world that could exist without war, but I think that there is no such thing as good without bad. If like everybody in the world was good, like it just makes no sense. Like, it wouldn't bring out if there were no bad people in the world, it wouldn't bring out the good people, the good inside of people. You need that. Do I think that war is good? No. But I do think that we need better leaders in this world so that we are using war in the right way.
Or at least there is some type of balance.
Yeah, because one of the big themes within this book really is that, the soldiers are the ones who pay the price.
And I think
for things that they don't even understand they're doing sometimes. But I do understand that Ukraine is defending they know exactly what they're doing. They're defending their land. But it's also up to Ukraine's leaders to get out of this, like get them out of this, get peace. I'm not saying give away land. I'm saying get your land back.
Exactly. Thank you.
It's up to the world's leaders to do that, and they're not doing it.
Thanks. I think Matthew has a question.
I'm Matt Johnson.
Again.
Yes, exactly. I was curious because you had discussed the divide between soldier or defender, because they're not all military, and civilians, and how that divide had slowly, maybe because of everything that's happened since the full-scale invasion. I was curious, based on the lessons learned of your own experience and also your extensive knowledge of the defenders here in Ukraine, are there any lessons learned on how we can help Ukraine's defenders in the future reintegrate into society so they aren't left behind, so they aren't kept separate?
I wish that one of my guests here could speak English because he works right within that sector.
We can translate if needed, though.
Yeah. Can you help me answer this? Please?
Може, українською ми
Yes, yes.
перекладемо.
I would like you to help.
Зараз.
Yes.
Так, наскільки я зрозумів, питання було про те, наскільки ми можемо допомогти ветеранам інтегруватися.
Так.
Станом на зараз, знаєте, важко про це говорити через те, що все, що воно відбувається, ну, типу, це ще все, що не закінчилось. І, от, знаєте, я їжджу в тому числі і на відпочинок, умовно, на відновлення до там бригад. І це досить важко, коли людина ще не вийшла звідти, але ще не вступила сюди. От. І тут не про відновлення, да. Хлопці, які повертаються, навіть маючи важкі там ушкодження, хочуть повернутися назад, бо як же я буду тут, а мої там хлопці. Це досить важке питання. Допоки воно не закінчилось, допоки війна триває, допоки хлопці повертаються і знають, що там все відбувається, воно все ще їх тримає. От. Там дуже багато і дуже інтенсивний, запечений важкими емоціями, сильними емоціями досвід. Таке, знаєте, дуже просте питання легко задати, відповісти на нього важко, тому що воно в собі має дуже багато складових, типу, як саме підготувати суспільство, та, чи підготувати, якщо раніше, там, умовно, з 14-го року, говорили про те, як сказати, як зустрічати ветерани і все таке, ніби як треба підготуватися до того, що прийде хтось, який якийсь не такий, як і ти, типу, щось таке. Зараз ніби суспільство треба готувати, тому що ветеранів дуже багато, військових дуже зараз багато, набагато більше, ніж то було в 14-15. Важке комплексне питання, типу, кого до чого готувати, да. Перш за все, те, що найкраще працює, це рівний рівному. Це там, де ветерани працюють з ветеранами. Це ті ветерани, котрі воювали 14-15 рік, там, щось робили для свого власного відновлення і наразі можуть допомагати ветеранам, які повертаються, військовим, які повертаються і стають ветеранами. І добре, що ініціатив різних ініціатив стає більше, в тому числі там як адаптивні види спорту починаються. Це для того, хто, умовно, не хоче працювати з головою, з психікою, для нього це може бути досить важко, то попрацювати можна через спорт, а як працювати, якщо в тебе не всі є кінцівки. Можна через адаптивний вид спорту, і в цьому нам в тому числі допомагають. І, здається, звідки, наскільки я знаю, чув звінта, не знаю, де він, але я знаю, що нам десь близько там 20 тих візочків для адаптивних видів спорту, для баскетболу на візочках нам взагалі з Америки звідкись передали, але звідки я не пам'ятаю. От, ці штуки. З'являються. Воно, знаєте, схоже на мурашник якийсь. Типу, і коли ти дивишся і ти не розумієш, типу, що воно відбувається. Якщо прослідкувати за кожною окремою мурашкою, що ти робила цілий день, ти ж перенесла щось, а зрештою, коли вони на їхню спільну роботу дивишся, вони будують щось велике. І приблизно зараз десь те саме відбувається. Відбуваються різні лінії підтримки ветеранів. В тому числі стартує скоро достатньо, напевно, реклама, але такої доброї. Стартує тренінг посттравматичного стресового росту ось в Лісовій Поляні для ветеранів. Тому хто дивиться з ветеранів і зараз хоче включитись, то я вам дуже раджу на це звернути увагу. Оскільки, як і війна, це не справа однієї людини, так і повернення, це теж не є справа якогось одного заходу, однієї людини, яка б це замогла відповісти за це чи придумати заходи. Це справа всіх.
Will you be able to translate for
I
this?
will, yeah.
Okay.
I'm professional. Well, I will translate. Я перекладу, мабуть, таке резюме дуже коротке, якщо ви не заперечите. So I'll translate like a summary of it, and for all of us who are joining online. So basically, it's a very complicated question, and there is no, as we all understand, there is no simple answer to this. And if in the previous years the number of veterans was smaller, maybe this was the question of how reintegrate veterans. Now the question is how to prepare the society itself, because the number will be huge. And who knows, and this is what I'm adding from myself, maybe they will be majority and not minority anymore, right? So also the question is, the war is not over, and it's hard to plan anything when you are still in this process. So to actually thinking about reintegration, you first need to finish the war, because veterans are, most of them are still, as I understand, on the front line. This is another thing. Things that work well probably is peer-to-peer approach, and veterans supporting veterans. A sport, adaptive sport is the correct term, right? Adaptive sport, and the support in these things, trainings, mental health support, these are probably like the best things that can be done, but you cannot solve all of it with just one program, one training, one organization, one person. It's a collective effort of all of us. And yes, and we all should be in this together from
and
different
that's like
sides.
when I first came in 2018, we were trying to help them develop the Ministry of Veterans Affairs, because that is, I know that they have one now, but it's like there needs to be an overall integrated system of all these different organizations that are helping veterans, because it's just too all over the place. Just like,
Нічого важливого не забула.
And mental health,
Дякую.
medication, not salt baths, like for treatment only.
And is this one of the characters of your book, Volodymyr? Am I right?
Yes.
If is it okay if I ask him a question?
Go.
Володимир, ви є також одним з персонажів. Ну, персонаж, я не знаю, як правильно казати, про документальні книжки цієї книги. Ви вже читали книжку?
Я ні, я книжку не читав, але я знайомий окрім того, що я знайомий точно з однією історією, яка там є, і ще з кількома історіями, бо я знайомий з цими людьми. От, а наразі я книжку ще не бачив.
Тоді почекаємо, поки ви прочитаєте, тоді буде вже конкретно, але дякуємо вам. І дійсно, воно того варто, тут історія, ну, прочитати обов'язково всім, я думаю, вартує. It's worth reading, it's a very powerful like book. And I just thank Volodymyr. I also want to make sure everyone else, if you guys have questions or comments, it's also okay if you have comments, right? Because we have maybe some veterans in the audience or people who work in different organizations. It's your time. You have a question.
My name is Sadislav, and I also wanted to thank Jennifer for her sincere and passionate attention to these problems of our country, for this splitting of Ukrainian and American worlds, which are not usually the same, unfortunately. So my question is, what's the attention of your war mates, of your brother in arms from the 92nd Engineering Brigade, maybe from Iraq, Afghanistan campaigns? Maybe they have participated also in the International Brigade here in Ukraine.
I don't think any of my own.
And maybe they have read or have heard about the preview of your book. What are their thoughts? Maybe they share it.
My guys, they're not very good readers. My comrades or my fellow officers are currently reading right now. So far it is very good feedback. My soldiers, I have to like convince them to read first. But I think that they will like this because they have a presence in the book as well. And
there was, like, I think at the very beginning in your foreword, you mentioned that when you started, or maybe when you were writing this book in the process, you were searching for a story of a universal story of the combat veteran. Have you found it? This universal story?
I'll have to go to many more wars, or where I have to go to more places where wars have finished.
To make it much more.
Yeah.
May I ask you to read one more abstract?
Sure.
Just the one that you prefer us to hear.
Okay. The Silence of the Quarry Trench. I'm sorry, I've kind of lost my voice. It's going away. November 2021, Novotroysk, Ukraine. In the silence of standing in a quarry trench, it's almost as if the air is gone, sucked into a white noise, even though I'm still breathing perfectly fine. It gives way to sounds that are often muted by the chaos of everyday life, sounds carried from kilometers away, a military tarp blowing in the wind, dogs barking from a distant frontline village, the muffled voices of soldiers, boots crunching against broken rocks, the unbalanced planks of wood teetering under the weight of soldiers crossing over the mud puddles. Even the distant vibrations and blasts of artillery and the faint popping of gunfire are a comfort in this place. We hiked through the Donbas after days of November rain to reach the positions at the top of the Quarry Mountains, moving along the caked-up mud that hugged the sunken tire tracks on a dirt road already warped by farming vehicles. Breathing, lungs, my weight tripled by the inches of quicksand, earth mercilessly clinging to my feet. Thank you. It was a reminder of how easy it was to fall into a kind of comfortable, the kind where one forgets that he or she may need to run to preserve life. So, where do you want to go? Ira had asked me the previous day. Ira, the unofficial 93rd Brigade press officer, clearly ran the operations for her team. She was the only press officer I wasn't hesitant to work with over the years, beginning with the first time she picked me up at a train station in Volnovakha, which I realized was only in a metaphoric sense as she wheeled up on a bicycle. But she always found a way to support the ideas I was after, finding ways to circumvent or barrel through the rules and bureaucracy that often worked against them. Her question was appropriate because I normally had an agenda for her, a longer form story to develop over multiple trips to the front line, the coexistence of farmers working the sunflower, corn, and wheat fields adjacent to the soldiers in trenches, the reality of oligarchs and industry on both sides of the border dictating the schedule of artillery falling, the 2014 volunteers still serving on the front line, stuck in the should I stay or should I go mentality, or the transparency of where the billion dollar US support packages to Ukraine were going, because they certainly weren't visible on the front line. Soldiers were still buying their own weapons, cars, and often their own uniforms in lieu of the upgraded and newly designed pixels the Ministry of Defense proudly issued them. Pretty for standing in a parade and in tatters a month later. But a story wasn't my ambition that day. I didn't really have any ambitions past the need to escape the peace life in Kyiv, where even I began feeling detached from the reality of war, no matter the proximity. Soldiers continued to die each week. It felt as if it were happening in another world, another time, so far away and removed from my existence. Like when I left the army, it was so easy to forget about it all. Once I was away from Afghanistan, from Iraq, and even before I left the service, the death counts just became death counts. Statistics and numbers without faces and stories. Just a few more moments in the quarry trench, leaning against the wall, taking it all in. I let the other journalist, a reporter out of Western Ukraine, walk far away through the maze of trenches to cover the soldiers manning the big guns, asking what they thought of the recent news, the escalation of troops again on the other side of the border. Were they prepared and ready? Take your time. I'm content in this place without the rush and competition. As nice as he was, it felt as if he was an invading tourist. Because the disconnect wasn't only about the war's reality. It was a disconnect from a place, from a world, from a people, of real and raw and simplicity, where no one knows what you're doing, where you are, except the people who are there with you. No external obligations back home, paperwork, bureaucracy, phones, only stay in the moment, because there's nothing more important than that moment. Being in Kyiv too long became very much the way Valera had explained it from the forest floor in Popasna. This focus on the trivial, being surrounded by a proclaimed attachment to an unshared experience, fighting and working against one another instead of focusing on those simplicities we find when working together to stay alive. I revert to the bunker under the earth, the kitchen area, the sleeping quarters, the downtime caves, back to where a puppy and two kittens stalk the chow table for handouts of government cheese and sausage slices, or if they're lucky, a prized piece of meat from unfinished borscht or soup. I photograph a white cat who pushes himself against the soldier resting and smoking a cigarette near the tarp opening. If any soldiers on the front line had disliked animals in their past, I found it hard to believe any of them could avoid conversion. They softened the hardest of spirits. The unit cook emerges from the kitchen area and hands me a cup of tea, my hand burning while the plastic essentially melts to my skin under the heat. I rest it on the table to cool off and notice the young soldier who dodged our path earlier, running off to some faraway corner out of view. I watch him clean a rifle under a lamplight, methodically, a calming motion, and listen to the sounds of the metal rod pushing through the barrel. Can I take a few shots? He nods without looking, and somewhere in a frame, as his comrades play with him and throw banter over his shyness, I catch a smile. He was dead the next day. So.
Jessica, any final comments or questions from you?
Well, that's hard to follow up on that reading. I suppose I would urge everybody out there who is able to, who is American, to call your representatives on behalf of Ukraine. I've done the same thing just this week. Congress is in session. This is our civic duty. Call, talk to them, tell them what you think, and tell them about this book. And I think, as Jen said, our leaders need to take responsibility, and more of them need to read this book as well. So, Jen, I hope to see this as a film someday also. Maybe a Ukrainian filmmaker could take it on with
I think
you.
I would rather that than an American filmmaker.
Yeah. So, I just echo gratitude for all the defenders of Ukraine and everyone who's holding the line as we speak. And also want to say thank you for your service, JT. It's an honor to know you.
I'll just add, thank you, Jessica. There's not much to add, but I also want to thank you for becoming the voice of Ukrainian veterans and, making sure they're heard abroad, not just in Ukraine. Thank you on behalf.
I hope I do them justice in this book. It's for all. It's for all of them.
Thank you. Дякуємо.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of our audience guests for your active participation tonight, for your big hearts. Again, if you may, there will be one copy at America House. Maybe once we know when it's possible to find the book, we will let you know. Дякуємо всім. Бажаю гарного вечора. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.